million people took to the streets in a bid to stop the war in Iraq, but ultimately their protest failed. CND, meanwhile, has spent half a century peacefully campaigning for nuclear disarmament, with little in the way of success. The poll tax riots did, however, produce results, likewise the Brixton and Toxteth riots. So if student protesters really want to influence politics, should they stop marching and start kicking off? Well, let's discuss the issue now. With me, Charlotte Gerada, the General Secretary of the London School of Economics Students' Union, the political activist Bruce Kent, plus direct action advocate Tamsin Omond. Afternoon to you all. Perhaps I described you as an advocate of direct action. Why do you think it works?
I think it's absolutely important that these people grab attention of the media, that they put this subject within the public debate, and that's what these tactics do. What I think was really interesting on Thursday is, they attacked two national treasures, both the Duchess of Cornwall and also the legacy of the Great War. But there is a third national institution here that is being attacked, and that is our institution of education. It has been accessible and excellent, and that is something that we can be proud of across the world. We are known for our education system, and this is under attack by the coalition government, so it doesn't seem that surprising. And in fact, it's an interesting tactic that these people are attacking national treasures too.
I'm going to come back to some of those points you made, but let me just get everybody's perspective on this then. And Charlotte, where do you stand? Does the action that we saw, does direct action work? Should it be used?
Well, yes, it has done in the past. History show that, and students generally feel disempowered by this coalition government. They're not being listened to. They've had broken promises made against them from the Liberal Democrats, who made tuition
to get violent. I mean, that's my point. To get active in the way anarchist almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think it illustrates the frustration that students are feeling right now. Not just students, it's also workers and academics. And also, it doesn't help by the way that the police behave. Being kettled for 7.5 hours. Some students were kettled until midnight. That's very, very frustrating. And anger is a kind of natural reaction to that.
All right, we'll come on to that as well in a second. Let's let Bruce Kent have his say. What do you think, Bruce?
That kind of direct action is actually completely counterproductive, because it takes the argument away from the issue, the integrity of politicians, the issue of student fees. It takes it away onto student violence, and so people forget what the argument is. So direct action is not one package. There's all sorts of direct action. Gandhi went in for long hunger strikes, direct action. I refused my tax on certain things, but nuclear propulsion. That's direct action. But this is rather, I think, quite negative. But I understand why it's going on, but I think it's negative.
Okay, Bruce, then, if it's negative, at least it is being talked about. We're discussing it now. The protests have been on the front pages of all the newspapers. There was a firefighters' march a few weeks ago. They were protesting about cuts to their service. It hardly make any newsprint at all.
Well, it's being talked about, but what's being talked about? The imprudence of students, the violence, that's what's being talked about. Not the corruption of a government which actually urges people to listen to non-violent protest, but then ignores it when it like the Iraq demonstration. So I think that this is a specific form of counterproductive action.
Charlotte, counterproductive. Would you have liked to have seen the protesters march, get their message across, and seen none of this, what we're seeing on our screens now?
I think it will lose some public support. People who do normally have sympathy with students because of what they're fighting for. I think some of that could be lost. I'm an advocate of peaceful protest, and I can safely say that the LSE students that I led were totally peaceful, and I thank them for that, and I'm very grateful that they behaved in a really honourable way. But the one, I suppose, not good thing about violence, but the one thing that it does add is more media attention, which is kind of like a balance that some people have been speaking about. The fact that there has been, really aggressive protesting. It shows that people are really upset and really frustrated, and that has spread globally. But then again,
the thing is, though, Tamsin, you can show your anger and you can show your upset with the government in so many other ways, to not take it out as was being done on police horses.
I think the violence on the streets on Thursdays was not something that was planned. This is a demographic.
But do you think that there was a group within there that was planned?
I really don't know. But this was a demographic that aren't used to being represented. They're not used to having a cause to complain. They're not used to going out onto the streets. You know, I was there, and there were groups of people who were 16. These are people who are losing their EMA. These are the people in council estates who will not be able to finish school. And they are the people who are not represented by our government, who David Cameron has the audacity to say the strong arm of the law will come down on those people. Well, they are the strong arm of society saying, let us finish our education. Let us, after we finish our education, go to university.
Go back to what Bruce said then, but it dilutes the message, doesn't it? I mean, you're getting the message across, Charlotte's getting the message across, but most of the day on Thursday, what was being talked about was police horses being hit with bricks, people shouting and covering up their faces, for goodness sake, when they're on a march.
Again, I would say, you know, national institutions are under attack, and they are attacking things on the streets that I would not condone at all. But at the same time, we have an absolutely fantastic education system that we are known for around the globe. This is something that the coalition government is pulling back on, and those cuts will not, you know, we won't be able to move forward from those cuts. These kids are inheriting an economic debt that they had nothing to do with. They're going to have an ecological debt that they have had nothing to do with creating. And we have to ask ourselves, you know, what is our responsibility to them? Do we shut them out of the process? Do we refuse to represent them? Do we say we're going to bring the strong arm of the law down on you? Or do we start a dialogue with these people? Do we say, okay, you're pointing out to us that £6 billion of tax that Vodafone have not paid should be paid?
You know, I know the students bring that up.
It's an interesting tactic, though, to go to the high street and not just to concentrate on Parliament is an interesting tactic, because they are offering solutions.
Attack Prince Charles and Camilla's car. I mean, come on, it's a bit off.
I think there was a massive fault in the policing of the day to bring that car down.
Well, you can't blame that on the police. Bruce, the fact, come in there. I was going to say, the fact of the matter is the protests that we saw against the Iraq war, the CND campaign for nuclear disarmament, the effect of them, they got coverage, but the effect on them didn't change what they were protesting about at all.
Yeah, CND has certainly changed. We've got everybody from the Pope to the Secretary General of the United Nations to Obama saying that nuclear weapons should go. We've got a test ban treaty. We've got all sorts of things in place. And I think that the attitude to nuclear weapons has greatly changed. But what is not coming out of this is to whose advantage is this? When CND had demonstrations, we always had small groups coming along to throw sticks, to throw bricks. We had people coming along with banners saying, support the Soviet bomb. Where did they come from? There isn't a single demonstration that's taken place in this country that hasn't been infiltrated by people from the right, anxious to discredit what's going on. And I would be very surprised if this affair wasn't actually also infiltrated by groups who, from the right, would like to see discrediting the demonstration. I mean, so I've got a suspicious mind, but I'm afraid that's the reality.
Neither of the guests here know that or are prepared to comment on that, Bruce. But Charlotte, let me ask you, there is a damaging element that has damaged the campaign by hanging off the cenotaph, by defacing national monuments and attacking a car of one newspaper put it, 2 elderly people. It's not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that the protesting has got more and more violent as we've gone along, and part of that is because the police cannot deal with the crowds properly. We have a heavy hand sometimes where students are being kettled as young as 14 years of age for anything up to 10 hours, and also a lot of my friends, a lot of students got hurt.
What do you expect the police to do then in these protests? Do you expect them to just stand and watch you?
No, I think they need to be more proactive. I think they shouldn't kettle unless there's actually been violence. And one of the protests a couple of weeks ago, one of the protests a couple of weeks ago, we were kettled before there was any violent action, and then violent action came about because of that. And I think that's normal. I think if you put 1 million old people, they'd start, you know, bashing things up with sheer frustration because it's cold, you're hungry, there's no water, there's no toilet facilities. You're led to do, you know, some really silly things. And I think it's annoying that the media isn't focusing on how the police have been acting really irrationally. I mean, one of my friends had a broken collarbone. She's been in hospital.
The police's role in this, the duty of any police force, in this case the Metropolitan Police Force, is to protect the public. Now, there are tens of thousands of young people on the march. The police have to protect the public.
They are the public.
To do it.
Yeah, and that's fine, but they're not protecting the public who are on the protest. I can honestly say that I have genuine change in opinion since I've been on these marches. I used to have full faith in the police, but after being cattled, after being pushed and shoved, I realised that when you're in these situations, the police aren't protecting you. It's a lie. They're saying they're protecting you from violence, but actually anything could happen. Someone could get hurt, someone could get raped, someone could get mugged. Anything can happen in a kettle, and there are not police there to protect you.
Tamsin, one of the prospects of the way forward in this, because there will be more student protests, the police talking about using water cannon and things like that. I mean, isn't there a possibility that these students march and there isn't trouble?
I think it absolutely is a possibility. I was on the protest on Thursday. I was waiting in Parliament Square when the protesters arrived. There was energy in the air, but it was not an aggressive or a violent energy. The police closed in. They kettled us from 4 p.m. We were there from 2 p.m. By 4 p.m. we were already kettled. That kettle lasted until 9 p.m. that evening. Things happened there that would not have happened. People made choices there that they would not have made had those police not been making it impossible for them to leave. I couldn't leave. I stood in a crowd trying to leave for 3 hours, and I couldn't leave. And yes, I saw people running around and getting more aggressive. But what do you expect when you put people who are not feeling represented, who have just heard that 21 MPs have pushed through legislation that has completely changed the face of our education system? What do you expect from these people when they're put in a tiny area where the edifices represent our society, represent what's wrong with government? Big closed walls with a lot of people on the street saying, represent us, let us have our voice heard.
Bruce, do you feel that it's inevitable in protests like this that some of the target of the frustration is going to be turned on the police and how they handle such situations?
Well, it depends. If the police behave sensibly, it doesn't have to happen. We hardly ever had confrontation with the police on C&D demonstrations. But if you do kettle people, as they call it, for 8 or 10 hours, and I saw it. I saw kids being held by the police only a yard from me, but the other side of the police, kept there, not allowed out. Well, of course your tempers go up. I think, first of all, they should have picked a place where they could go to, whether it's Hyde Park or something, and really give them cooperation. You can't expect people to march to Parliament and then turn around and march somewhere else. It doesn't make sense. I think it was a very bad plan to begin with, and I think kettling would simply put the gas fire under the whole affair.
Just one final thought from you then, Bruce, and I'll ask the girls in a minute. Do you think that what happened on Thursday, what has happened in the past, has completely changed what sympathy or empathy the wider public have for the students' cause?
No, I don't think so. I think the wider public, who are feeling the cuts in every single way. One of the things that was on this march was the educational maintenance allowance, which has been cut. And all sorts of people are affected, and I think that there's a great sympathy for the students, but a great condemnation of this stupidity that went on Saturday.
Lots of emails coming in about this, as you would expect. We're going to have to leave it there. Bruce Kent, thank you very much for your time. Charlotte Gerada, thank you as well. And Tamsin Omond, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, don't forget to let us know what you think. Lots of those emails already coming in, whether you support the students, whether you think the tactics of the police were underhand. News@sky.com. You can text us 84501. And you can follow our stories on Twitter. It is Sky News Weekend. We'll take a look at our website right now, and there's a Thor, but find out why you shouldn't be so sure of avoiding more snow.